No, they came out with a report a few years ago saying that King Tut shared DNA with men up in Britain. And the thing is, the Egyptians went into Britain, particularly Scotland, later on down the line. As a matter of fact, Scotland is named after an Egyptian princess, Scotia. And many of the descendants of those Egyptians are there to this day, but they're now known as gypsies. And the term gypsy is just a variation of the word Egyptian.
Whites have long hair, blacks have short curly hair. What is the reason for that? Black's hair, your follicle, my follicle, is not round, it's flat, like a ribbon. So you know how Christmas you rub your hand on the ribbon and it curls up? Well, that's the way our hair do. White hair is like a soda straw, it's round, so it hangs. What is the purpose?
That's your hair.
All of the main arteries that take the messages and information from the brain to the rest of the body pass through the human neck. So if you're caught in an ice age, you've got to grow enough hair to shield the neck, to insulate the neck. Otherwise, you're going to die. Same thing with the nostrils. When you're in the sun of Africa, you need these big nostrils we have because you got to cool the brain down. But if you're in Europe and all that ice, you don't want to cool the brain down. So you need a smaller nostril bridge so you can warm the air up that's coming in. These simple physical anthropological realities.
The Greeks lost their history, all of it. Okay, the Greeks lost all their history. You know who had their history? The Arabs had the Greeks' history. The reason we know Greek history is because of Islam. Because of the Arabs revered Greek history. And what the Greeks were doing and all their philosophies, they wrote it all down. Then Greece lost their history through wars and this and that and the other. And they regained their history because of Arabic texts.
Oh, thank heaven, 7-Eleven. Oh, thank heaven for 7-Eleven. What's 7-Eleven? 7-Eleven was when the Moors, Africans from Morocco, which is where the word Moor comes from, but Africans from northern Africa went across the Iberian Peninsula, which is a very short distance, into Europe. And they brought culture, they brought writing, they brought civilization, and they brought Europe out of the Dark Ages.
It was the Romans that began to call the black people in Africa. Because remember that day we didn't speak English. So if you don't speak English, you're not going to call yourself black. Right? So if you don't speak traditional African language or Portuguese or Spanish, you will not call yourself Negro. At that time, Spanish was not dominant, so there's no Negro, there's no Portuguese.
You see them fists, y'all? You see them black power fists? Yeah, that's my babies.
At that time, the Romans,
they letting you know.
And the Roman word for black persons was Moorish, coming from the
they
Greek
letting you
root
know.
of black.
See?
Portugal.
What'd you say? RBG?
Parts of southern France.
Up until 1700s, all the medical surgery and general medicine in Europe was written in Arabic. All of the major universities of Europe, where the physicians and the scientists
what are you pointing at?
were all studying, was in Spain and Portugal.
See? Saluting the flag.
The West called Moors, and the reason the West keep emphasizing them as Moors,
saluting the flag.
This is the same African we got enslaved that gave us all the wealth of knowledge that allowed us to enslave you.
At this time in Europe, we're talking the early 8th century.
Yeah.
Most European kings and queens could neither read or write. The Moors built vast libraries. Anybody, irrespective of your religion, you could practice your religious faith. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the relative freedom. We find Moors in the army of the Spanish Emperor Trajan. In fact, in Italy, you have what's called Trajan's column, and you can see more clearly Moor soldiers on horseback on that column. You can go to Rome and see it for yourself. You have at least one emperor in Rome of Moorish ancestry. His name is Macrinus. He's specifically described as a Moor. You have other high-ranking Moors in the Roman army.
Moors were known for building castles all throughout Europe, and some of those same castles can actually be found around North Africa. They call them desert castles or kazirs, but they are castles all around Africa.
The heart and soul, the thought, the mind that built the castles came from Africa. And they went through Europe and they built them. They built them straight through Spain, straight through Portugal, going up into France, going up into other parts of the world.
The earliest example.
So we get a close up. See that, Edward? You see that?
I found.
Yeah, see that?
An area that is now known as Nubia. If you were
Yeah,
to go to the
that's Surah,
Museum in Ascalon,
Fatiha,
you'll find
Ikhlas,
a model
Nas,
of a
Halak.
castle, complete with a moat, drawbridge,
letting you know the essence of it.
fortifications, all of the
Saying?
architectural elements that we associate with castles in any part of Europe existed in Africa as late as 1800 BC. Before there was
It don't matter what the belief is. We know the original people in Arabia is actually Cushites, and proof that Muhammad Sallallahu was indeed, you know, from the original Cushites. So, you know,
The monument
yeah.
that we know as Stonehenge,
But that right there,
a European writer
that
by the
red, black, and
name of
green,
Massey
yeah.
said in one
I
of
let
his
you know
books
what
that
mine's based.
Stonehenge
Well, I'm Dean, but what I'm conscious about.
Now, this is
You
from
know,
a European
the
writer.
Quran say fight against
A lot of
oppression.
times when
We're the most
black
oppressed and the longest
historians
oppressed.
say something like this,
You know what I'm saying?
then it's
So,
written off as being
that's a must.
Afrocentric.
You know, showing you a little bit. You know, this is the kids' day. You know, on this day, Saturday. You know, this is the kids' day. You know, saying that, you know, it's a rest, all right. It's a day of rest, putting, you know, the stuff in your mind. You know,
Most of the great saints
and the kids love it. You know what I'm saying? It's become a ritual in the family. You know, every Saturday,
There's another patron
especially. I mean, we do it regard. You know, it ain't necessarily Saturday.
statues of this man
You know,
all over
but
Italy.
we do it
Paintings of
um,
San Calogero.
almost every other day.
Sicily, they worship
And
this man.
it doesn't matter what
They
day,
still have statues
you know,
of many
but
more
Saturday
in
we
Europe
chose,
today.
you know what I'm
They
saying, to
have a
put it
statue of
special on that
Saint
day. It's either a
Benedict
Saturday or a
in
Friday.
1700s.
And really, usually most time it's Friday,
Of Saint
you know.
Gregory, that's in a
So,
museum in
but, you know,
Germany.
Saturdays
So
is the
there's
day if we can
statues
make it on
of
Friday,
African
you know.
people all over Europe to this day that
I'm letting you
can
know,
see, but gotta
you know.
go to museums to see
There's
them.
new
They're very
seeds coming
quiet
up.
about them. You have to go over
That's
there.
that
And also
RBG. That's that RBG in their mind, you
learn
know.
about these things in different languages because they keep that history hidden because they'll put it in another language. The Ivory Bangle lady was an African woman whose tomb they
Where's your
found
point at?
in the York area.
Where you pointing at?
Now,
Ooh,
whenever
you
they
guys
find
got
African
into that.
people in Britain, what they
I
would
told y'all
normally
about
do
getting
is
into
just
my
try to
cabinet
write
with
them
the
off as being
papers.
slaves. Or
Now I
they
gotta
had
clean
been
that up.
enslaved. It's a possibility that they
It's
were
all right.
slaves.
Don't worry about it.
But
I got
the
it.
Ivory
I got it.
Bangle
Don't worry,
lady,
baby.
They couldn't write her off as a slave because it showed that she had so much wealth. She could
Is that
not
what you was
possibly
pointing
have
at?
been a slave. The way her tomb was
You can
made
get up
was
there
made
and
out of
touch it if you
stone,
want to.
which showed wealth. Inside the tomb,
You wanna
it had
point
all
to it?
types of artifacts and jewelry like ivory.
You want to tell? I told them
necklaces and
don't be
bracelets
getting up there
on her
touching, you know,
wrists. It
RBG
showed
flag.
was
Just
extremely
look at it.
wealthy. Johannes Morris
You know,
was a 13th century
the significance of these
high-ranking
surahs,
official in Italy.
why I chose those specific
And
ones to put it on the flag.
carving a statue of him
For anybody that knows,
in Italy right now.
you know,
And this
Falak
statue
is
of Morris
you know,
shows it's
seeking
really
refuge
African.
in, you know, in the Most High, the Eternal,
African head.
you know, and it's about, you know, keeping away. Well, Al Nas is about keeping away the shaitans. We know who the shaitans are in the flesh. You know what I'm saying? And also the, you know, the whisperers, the waswasil. You know, we know the most, you know what I'm saying, it's the Caucasian nations, you know. But we also know that excuse me. Al-Ikhlas is up there, you know what I'm saying? And that's about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what I'm saying? And then you got, you know what I'm saying, Nas, which is about, Falak, which is about, you know what I'm saying, against witchcraft and people putting spells on you and stuff like that, you know. And let's see. What are you doing?
They said that you go to Asia and it's nothing but a carbon copy of Africa because it was settled by the Africans.
A lot of people
Okay,
don't know that there are
no,
pyramids
just
all
put
over
it up.
Asia,
Right there.
and there are pyramids in China,
Around the flag,
Japan, they have an
right here.
underwater pyramid that a lot of people don't know
Those
about.
are attributes.
You go there now, and that's one of those ancient mysteries. But
You know,
again,
those are the
pyramids all
attributes.
over the planet.
Those are the attributes. You know, these are the surahs. We know what blackness symbolizes. We know what gold symbolizes. We know what the white symbolizes. And the green.
Southern Thailand, you have a related group in northern Malaysia, sometimes called Sakai, S-E-K-A-I. You have the Andaman Islanders, and there are at least two groups. One group is called the Onge, O-N-G-E, or O-N-J-E, I think it's O-N-G-E, and another is called the Jawara, J-A-R-A-W-A. And then you have black populations in the Philippines, sometimes called Negritos, or Eta, or I think we should call them Akta, which just means the people. You have a tradition of a similar group in Taiwan. These are the Dominions of Africa.
Yeah.
These are the small blacks. Similar in many ways to the Twa, or so-called pygmies in Central Africa. These are very, very ancient people who left Africa perhaps 60, 70, maybe 100,000 years ago and became isolated.
The Padang people, that's a group of people in Asia, and the women have these rings that they wear on their necks that's identical to an African tribe of women in East Africa who wear the same type of rings on their necks. So this just shows that the African-Asian connection is still there. They still carry on some of the African cultures and traditions in certain parts of Asia.
I once had a professor of mine working on my doctorate tell me that she went to Japan and they went into the mountains of Japan. Now, this isn't a conscious woman by most definitions, but she couldn't wait to come back and tell me this. She said, Umar, I was in Japan. We went up into the spiritual temples of Japan, and we sat down in one of the temples waiting for the priest to come out and teach us a little bit about what they believe and what they stand for. She said, Umar, they walked out of the temples and their skin was just as black as ours. They had gray afros because they were elders. Now, she said the phenotype looked like the modern Asian. But she said the skin was black and they had gray afros, hair standing up on top like Don King. And she said it totally overcame me. They sat down and they began to talk. And she said I couldn't believe these were black men. They were Japanese, but they were black men.
When I went over to Indonesia, I went there at night and I would see billboards of very light-skinned Asian Indonesian people. And then when I went to my hotel, I would go and watch these movies and I would see these very, again, light-skinned, pale-skinned Indonesian Asian people. But the next day when I went out into the streets of Indonesia, everybody was either my color or darker. I didn't see one person who looked like these people that were on the billboards and on television. So they would pick and choose and get the whitest looking Asian people to promote in the media over there. And when I walked around Indonesia, I saw people like jet black, dark. I ran into a couple of people with afros. I saw one Asian brother, full-blooded Asian guy with an afro, and I had to stop him. I said, brother, where are you from? And the brother was like, I'm from here, right here in Indonesia. So that African presence, that African phenotype is still throughout Asia to this day.
Look at the Buddha's hair. No Chinese person's hair looked like that. The Buddha has knotty hair. Every time you see the Buddha, his hair is knotty. Just a thought.
There's a painting called the Nambam painting of the Portuguese when they first go over to Japan. When you look at this painting, the painting was made in around sometime in the 1500s, and it was the first eyewitness account of what they saw. Many of the Asian people there were dark-skinned, and half the people who were supposed to be Portuguese were dark-skinned.
There's a tradition begun by a man named Alexander Francis Chamberlain, at least in April 1914, in a publication called the Journal of Race Development. And I can quote him almost exactly. And he says, and even in far-off Japan, we can find traces of the ancient Negro. For when the Japanese armies in the 8th century, now here I'm paraphrasing, when the Japanese armies in the 8th century were fighting their traditional enemy, the Ainu, they were led by a famous Negro general named Sakanoye Tamura. And this man became the first shogun in Japanese history.
Also in Malaysia, when I went down to Malaysia, I went into the rainforest over there. And it's very difficult to get over to some of these spots. Some of these people there are very secluded. And because they're secluded, they were able to avoid many natural disasters, and they were also able to avoid invasions. So they didn't mix in with some of the invading forces, so they kept their same African phenotype. And if you go to Malaysia, there's a tribe called the Batek tribe
Yeah, Batek. Batek.
Like an African tribe.
Batek.
They have
Batek.
hair,
Batek.
nose, lips, everything about these people
Batek.
looks like an African tribe. One of the things we know about white supremacy and light skin supremacy, because even when you look at Asia, even when you go to East India, they practice.
That's right.
Why? Because all of these places were colonized by the Europeans and their culture infected the people. So one of the things that they do is they also have a tendency to do what? Hide the darker brother. As a matter of fact, there was an incident that happened with Miss Fiji. They had the Miss World competition, and they chose this woman to be Miss Fiji. And Miss Fiji has more Europeanized features. And the people of Fiji spoke out against her. They weren't really trying to hate on her, but they said, look, this woman doesn't represent us. She doesn't look like us. She doesn't have our nose.
Look at, yeah.
And we're very proud of what we look like, and we want somebody to represent us. Because, again, we're trying to use that Europeanized Miss Fiji to bring in tourism and not scare away tourists. But the people spoke out against her. And this just shows that many people around the world, they're proud of their Africoid features. One of these groups of people who inhabit India were a group of black-skinned people called the Dravidians or the Tutpals. People think in the culture of India, all kinds speak of and look at this is Native Muhammad.
Muhammad is global. Many Indian colleges.
Yeah, that's neat.
Even ordinary.
Mahatma got in his office and said that he got the operational tech. But not us from Afghani. It was what? Mature for the ancestors.
First of all, Australia itself is the world's second smallest continent, second only after Antarctica. It's the smallest inhabited continent. The name Australia means Great South Land. And the first people of Australia were the people we call Aboriginal Australians, commonly called blackfellas. And of course you have different names, the Puri, the Guri, the Noongar, and various names.
The people of Australia, originally Australia was an African land. In fact, in European documentation, they considered it an African satellite. When the British came into Australia and began the mass extermination of African people, they were crystal clear who they were exterminating because they said it. And also we know that right off the coast of Australia was an island called Tasmania, a little island off the coast of Tasmania. There are no living Tasmanians in existence right now. You can't find a Tasmanian man, woman, or child because the British systematically exterminated the entire population.
Yeah. The green one right there. It goes in the cup right. It goes in the cup right there.
That Aboriginal people in Australia were considered humans for the first time. In January 1967, there was a national referendum to decide Aboriginal Australians should have Australian citizenship. Up to that point, they were officially, and you can document this, classified as flora and fauna and plants and animals.
In Australia, they would literally breed out the melanin of the people. You know, they would have they would take the children and take them to breeding camps and breeding farms and breed the darker ones and the mulatto ones with white, and they would
evil
breed
people,
the melanin
boy.
out of these people.
I mean, that's just an evil. Who thinks of stuff like that? And they be telling Africans and blacks all around the world don't think about it, don't talk about
the Aboriginal people. So it's very deep what was going on over there.
You have three major island chains: North Pacific, West Pacific, and South Pacific. Melanesia, Polynesia, Micronesia. Melanesia is the South Pacific. That means the Black Islands. And the biggest island is New Guinea.
Yes,
Others
indeed.
include New Caledonia, New Ireland, New Britain, Fiji, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, which used to be known as New Hebrides. These are the Black Islands. And the people that I've encountered in this part of the world tend to say they come from Africa.
Of course.
People tend to have very, very Africoid features: dark skin, tightly curled hair, large afros, we call them today. Many of them say they come from Africa, especially in Fiji. And also in Buka Island. I ask people, where do you come from? We come from Africa. And they're very matter of fact about it. Buka, B-U-K, means black skin. And they have the reputation of being the blackest human beings on earth. So quite naturally, that was where I wanted to lay my head.
It's called Hidden Colors. If you get a chance, you know what I'm saying, to
If you look at images of King
buy that
Kamehameha,
or get it,
I know you have.
very, very good.
Who
You know
is
what I mean?
what might be
Very, very
considered
good.
the founder of Hawaii.
I mean,
It's
he
like
puts
the
it
founding
down.
father of Hawaii.
You know what I'm
Politically
saying?
Africa.
Puts it down. Real. Yes, indeed.
One of the most famous Hawaiians is a guy named Duke Kahanamoku. Duke was one of the forefathers of modern surfing, and they would use Duke to promote tourism in Hawaii. They would send him to the continental United States to promote swimming in Hawaii and surfing, and Duke had problems getting into swimming areas when he came to the continental U.S. because people thought that he was black because he was so dark. And many of the native Hawaiians, they have that dark African phenotype. If you go to places like Maui and some of the remote areas of Hawaii, they look like black people, just like Samoans. You go to Samoa, they look like black people over here in America.
Watch your hand.
I'm doing an interview, a call-in thing, and somebody called in and says, I'm a Hawaiian. And he says, the problem was you just didn't meet the right people. I said, really? He says, when I was a young boy, my grandmother used to tell me that when Kamehameha was trying to unite the Hawaiian Islands, this is around 1815, that he ran into trouble and he sent back to Africa for reinforcements. He said that was a Hawaiian tradition.
African people, they've been coming to the Americas for years, thousands of years before the Europeans. And this is why many Europeans knew how to get over to the Americas based on maps that African people left for centuries.
We wear the gene pool of the Native American population. We wear the gene pool of the African, which is called Moors, who had preceded Columbus to this country. And we wear the gene pool of those Africans who came from the continent. And so we felt that this land, and I do now still feel this land is ours. I'm an African American. Africa is my race. America is my geopolitical place. I'm not surrendering that to anybody.
One of the things we know is there are Europeans who wrote
We need to
books
have Africa because that's the
about
most
the
resources.
African presence in America before, but it's difficult to actually get your hands on some of the copies of these books. They're real hard to find because it wasn't popular for white folk or black folk, but especially white scientists to say that African folk, that Moorish people were in America prior to the European coming here.
There are three belts that leave the coast of Africa. There's one that's in the north, there's one in the middle, and there's one in the south. When you look at this middle one literally will take you right into the Gulf of Mexico, even if you didn't have power boat. And what's going to happen is the Africans are going to start to move into this area here, and they're going to begin to settle in this corner of the Gulf of Mexico. They're going to develop, according to what our research shows, three major cities: Tres Zapotes, San Lorenzo, okay, and La Venta.
If you go to Mexico, southern Mexico now, especially in the provinces and towns in southwest Mexico.
Oh, by the way,
they'll tell you there's
and I
two
said
black
shaitan
people
in the
there.
flesh.
The ones that came on the ship, meaning those
Well, for
who were
those of you that
enslaved,
know what shaitan
and the
means,
ones who
take
came
it to the meaning of his
before the
word.
ship,
You know what I'm
meaning
saying?
those like the Olmecs and
Rebellious
others who had been
against the,
here
ways
at
of
a
Allah
point where
subhanahu
no
wa
one
ta'ala,
know
or,
when that Genesis was.
against
They just were
Al-Mizan,
always
which you
here.
call the balance, the ancient Commissions or Kushites, called the Ma'at, you know what I'm saying? Either way, you cannot take the history, and it's not just history, it's what's going on now. You know what I'm saying? Even with Hollywood being ran by Jews and them forming it at the slavery time of entertainment was formed during the time of slavery. You know what I'm saying? And they exploited black people then, right before we got out of slavery. And they continue on after slavery. They made it hard for a person to get a job, or they made it easy for a person getting a crime. So the only thing left is entertainment. So, yeah, this is me, teaching the babies, teaching my kids and shit. You know what I'm saying? Get this in their head, And I mean,
and that Africans all through the histories were supposedly brought here as slaves.
I just, man, it's just crazy. I even so much went to the extent, hold on.
To state that there was an African civilization in the Americas some 5,000, 10,000 years ago. The other part of it is
see the card. This is a copy of the old card. You know what I'm saying? It's a copy of the old card.
That all Western books
I don't use these no more, but that's what I had. I got it's similar.
So
you know what I mean?
Said that
but
any evidence of black history here
so
had to be
it is done. This man Cole. That right there was a full-blooded Aztec. You just saw the afro.
The top man.
Hey, what you doing?
See about Mesoamerican civilization.
Please put it back. Put that back up in there. Don't go in there again, okay?
When I was down there in Mexico,
I'm not gonna tell you
I saw
again.
one Olmec statue. It was very interesting to me. It had the face of an African person, and the name of the statue was actually called Monkey Looking in the Sky.
Wow.
And what they would do, they would try to pretend that a lot of these statues were actually animals. Like the Olmec heads, they would try to say that they were jaguars and they were aliens from outer space. The European archaeologists would try to make up anything to say that they were not black. But this one statue called Monkey Looking in the Sky is clearly
y'all ready to get ready and take y'all to the park?
And it looks like a person. It is a person. And this just goes to show the depths that these archaeologists will go to deny the African history.
It's
One of
okay.
the earliest groups that I can find archaeologically would be the
That's Dr. Anderson. He deals in
That's why when you go out, you look at your map.
Claude Anderson. He deals in black economics, basically. How black people need to be together as a group and deal in economics like everybody else. The Mexicans, the Chinese do it, the Italians do it, the Jews do it. Everybody do it except for us. So he's actually got a fishery and stuff like that, set up. So he's just not talking about it. He did that,
16,000 years ago. 6,000 years ago.
Be a good person to get in contact with, y'all.
Across the Bering Straits into the United States, and they came into the United States across the Bering Straits into Canada, and down to the northern part of the United States, and down into the southern part, and they interbred and met and interbred with blacks, those Folsom people. And otherwise, that's why American Indians never had slant eyes and were never yellow skinned. They became round eyed and brown skinned and red skinned.
All over the country of Costa Rica, you have these little African-like statues just all